And we can go on to item E, which is presentation and action items. And our first one is our 16th and very exciting update on the COVID-19 school reopening. So we are after coming back from spring break and looking forward to our 16th update.
Thank you. All right, and Julie, I believe, is going to be sharing her screen. Here we go. Alrighty, so we're just very excited to be back after spring break, and look at us, we're back into the swing of things and having all of our students back on campus 5 days a week. And we're also very happy that we have been able to continue the Virtual Learning Academy for families who want to remain in distance learning for their children through the remainder of the school year. And so the next slide, we just wanted to give you all a little bit of a snapshot of what all of our schools look like. So we were all busy out there yesterday at each of our schools after spring break and getting some pictures, and it just the kids talking to them. They are so excited to be back on campus. And also one of the changes that we've been able to make too is to be able to offer live art and music and PE classes. So that's just a change that we've been able to put in place, and very thrilled about that. So these next couple of slides are just of each of the schools. So we'll just take a minute on each of them and getting a kind of a snapshot of having all of the kids back. It's great.
Marcy, I would add that the sandwich there, Christy Fish let me know that a kid did that to show how happy they were to be back in school.
So cute. Very good. And Manor. And so there's some music there. Students in music, and then one of those other pictures is in the art class, and then out in the garden. So the schools are really taking advantage of all of the spaces that they have on the campus. Manor is one example of a school that's opened up its garden. So they actually have classes assigned into the garden for one of the recesses. And Wade Thomas. And so one of the elements, just with keeping our schools is limiting the access of non-students or staff onto the campuses. So with Wade Thomas there in that upper picture is families who have dropped their kids off in kindergarten or maybe first grade. And so each of the schools, depending on their size, does have some ingress and egress locations as to where each family would have their child enter. And White Hill. And White Hill, you can see the kids are much bigger, but there's also, we're lucky that we have the space on our campuses to be able to have the distancing required on each of our schools. So I think down there on the bottom is one of the choir classes. Maybe it's one of band, they just don't have their instruments, not sure. But yeah, so it's just a snapshot of kids being back and school resuming. So getting back to some of that normalcy that we have and what we know is really good for our kids. All right, so this is just a snapshot. Marin County still remains in Tier 3 moderate status, and we were designated as of 3/24. And for a county, so we do know, and it'll be in a later slide, is there's been a change to the blueprint, but it doesn't go into effect until June. And that's if some strategies are met or some factors are met. But so for right now, for a county to advance to a less restrictive tier, it must have been in the current tier for a minimum of 3 weeks, and it must meet the criteria for the next less restrictive tier for all 3 measures in adjusted case rate, overall test positivity rate, and equity quartile for at least 2 prior weeks. And over there in Marin County tracks their dashboard, and that's where over in the non-highlighted off to the right is where Marin County was at this snapshot in time as of March 15th. So we still monitor what's going on throughout our county, because we want to be able to know what we might be needing to look forward to should there be a change in the case rate in Marin County. And so now that we're in the orange tier, Marin County Schools has updated their dashboard. So they're now in, it's orange because that's the color tier we're in. And since our last update, we have had one more suspected in-school transmission. So last time there were 11, it's now 12. And that was a change in the student-to-student suspected school transmission. And so the numbers, as you can see, really do remain quite low for Marin County. And then we in our school district, we're still maintaining our dashboard. We had a number of weeks where we didn't have any updates or changes needed. And then right before the spring break, we did have a scenario 2, which was a change at Whitehill by adding, let's see, I think it went two changes there. And those were both, as you can see in scenario 2, is a student or a staff member has been in close contact with a family member or someone who tests positive. So that's, again, an outside of school close contact that was not at school that occurred. So in terms of Ross Valley, we still maintain only one suspected in-school transmission, and that would be a student-to-student transmission. And so still throughout Marin County and Ross Valley, all of our schools in Marin, is that there has been no student-to-adult transmission of COVID in Marin County. So what that really shows is that all of our protocols of distancing, face coverings, cleaning are working. And it really does show and help to keep all of our schools continue to be a very safe place. And what this slide shows is some elements of what are the essential elements of a safe K-12 school for in-person instruction. And again, we're relying on the science and the experts to be able to tell us from the medical field and the science around COVID and how we can continue to mitigate all of the factors and keep our schools safe. And the key mitigation strategies that have been determined to be essential to safe delivery of in-person instruction have been proper fitting and correct use of masks, stable groups, physical distancing, adequate ventilation, and hand hygiene. And these are actually put in order that they've determined are the most important or critical aspects to the infection mitigation strategies. That link in there of infection mitigation strategies, that's a live link. So if anybody wanted to go on and look at that, it would take you to a state maintained website. So that's good news. We have all of those elements in place in all of our schools. And so we continue to see very low transmissions. And with the changes to the tier 3 with the orange, is that we're no longer having to close any cohorts. It's all going to be based now on contact tracing and being able to have any person, student or staff member who is positive, they will remain quarantined, or in a scenario 2 for a student or a staff member who has had close contact with a person who does test positive. So this is a strategy that the county has changed, county health, in order to ensure that our schools do remain open. And they found that when they were utilizing the closing of cohorts, there wasn't the continued spread. And so it didn't seem like a necessary mitigation strategy of actually closing cohorts. So that's why they made that change. Alrighty, and with the Marin County guidelines, 10 were updated. There are 30, and those are the 10 listed there. And each of our school sites and our district office has now been busy. If they haven't already completed or reconvened their task forces, they're in the process of reconvening their task forces and being able to make the needed updated language into each of our school site and our district office plan and make those changes. Once finalized, they'll be sent to Chris and me for review. And then Chris our CBO, will be able to get those into our CSP. So we have the school site specific safety plans, and then we have our COVID safety plan. The COVID safety plan is the document that is a Cal OSHA required document that all of our SSPPs live within, as well as our Cal OSHA plans too, to ensure that our employees are safe. And we have gone away from referring to cohorts as a classroom or a half class size, as in our olden days, but now referring to those as stable groups. From the state level, a cohort, the definition of that for the state has a very different definition. And so Marin County has also adapted and changed. So some of us were still getting used to changing away from calling it cohorts to stable groups. And with our spring break, we know that there was some families and some staff did travel, and that's still following the state guidelines around travel, and that we know that travel itself can be a risky activity, because what happens when you travel is typically you're not maintaining your family grouping, you are coming into contact with many other folks. And as we know, California has different guidelines than Nevada or Hawaii or other countries, for example. And so with there being an increase, because all different states and counties, their spring breaks, for example, fall at different times. We don't all have our spring break from April 5 to April 12. And so with counties easing restrictions, they've seen an uptick in cases, Marin included. Now, Marin has actually gone down a bit. I've been monitoring those case rates, positivity case rates, and they are going back down a little bit. So hopefully that will maintain. And with spring break, we won't see with people coming back, because we do know it takes a minimum of 5 days from a time a person has been exposed to actually be able to, if they are going to be positive, that's when they would test positive, if after 5 days of exposure. And so we may see an uptick again in Marin in the next week or two. So for our schools, Marin County Public Health strongly recommends a 10-day quarantine after out-of-state travel. And school districts can have more restrictive guidelines in place for travel quarantining. Our district is sticking with the Marin County guidelines. And there is a way that students can return sooner. And that's if they and all members of their household test negative after day 7 of returning from or having a potential for an exposure. And then they can return as soon as they show us that their student has had the negative test. So so far, so good. A number of our families did let our school sites know that they would need an independent study following spring break because they were quarantining. Some families, that's because they traveled, and for other families, it's they're quarantining because they know that others did, even though they didn't, and they want to be sure that their students are not going to be a potential exposure. So they're choosing to quarantine as well. And this is our decision tree for schools. It has been updated for orange or tier 3 status. And so this is kind of the chart that we follow to help us navigate if we do have a report of an exposure or a positive. And this decision tree has been updated related to folks who have been fully vaccinated. We know that all of our employees have had the opportunity to be vaccinated. It is not a requirement. As an employer, we're not requiring it, but we did offer it. There were numerous opportunities, and we're happy to say that we have the majority of our employees have been fully vaccinated, and a person is fully vaccinated if after their 14th day, after their second dose, if it's of the 2-dose vaccine, Moderna and Pfizer, or 14 days after the first dose, if it's a 1-dose vaccine like Johnson & Johnson or the Janssen. So this is what we follow, and we are very much in contact with Marin County Health, and we are very thankful for the support they provide, because they have nurses on standby to support our schools in the event that we have a question that we're not quite sure how to proceed through that. So I'll stop there for a second and just see if anybody, before we move on to Julia, does anybody have any questions of anything covered so far? Nope. All right, good to go, Julia.
All right. So as you all know, and as we show those beautiful pictures at the beginning of the presentation, we are now in phase 4, which is a full return to in-person instruction with a shortened day. And our TKers through our 8th graders are all have the opportunity to be in school every day of the week. So that's very, very exciting. And it really was wonderful to be able to tour all of the campuses this week and see it in action. And just noticing a real lightness in the air. It just felt very sunny and happy. Teachers, particularly at the elementary level where they no longer need to room and Zoom, were just elated to get to really be with kids in a different way. So that has been really wonderful, and kudos to everyone, parents and students and teachers and staff who've helped to make that happen. And then of course, looking still forward to a full return, certainly at the start of next school year, where we'll go back to a regular school day schedule. But we are getting there, we're close, and it feels really wonderful to have made this progress. In terms of our in-person learners at the elementary level, 95% of our kiddos are in person in 5 days a week. And at the middle school level, 87% have chosen to be in person or are able to come in person. And at the elementary level, we made the decision to really try not to continue with the rooming and Zooming with very young children. It's difficult to imagine having a full class of kids in the room and managing a small number of children on Zoom. And so we now have 3 dedicated virtual learning teachers, our VLA, Virtual Learning Academy teachers. 1 for TK, K first, 1 for 2nd and 3rd graders, and 1 for 4th and 5th graders. And they all started this week on Monday, and they follow a very similar schedule to the in-person. They start at 8:30 and end at 1:30, just like everybody else, unless they're in kindergarten, in which case they end the day at 12:30. And so for our Virtual Learning Academy, a couple of things. We identified teachers at every grade level, 1 point person who would serve as a partner, a curriculum partner to the virtual learning teachers and share their curriculum with them. 2 of our virtual learning teachers are new to the district, and so they're supporting them in any way that they can. But that's been really wonderful to make sure that, that there's continuity between our in-person instruction and our virtual learning instruction. And I already mentioned that they're following a similar schedule, and there's a combination of synchronous and asynchronous work. These are, what we would typically call combination classes, but the numbers are fairly small. And so I've checked in with the teachers and things are going very well. They're able to really individualize instruction. And sometimes they'll have one group working asynchronously while they are doing direct instruction with the other group, and then they'll flip it. But they're reporting lots of success and having a good time getting to know all the kids. And it's an interesting group of kids who get to know each other really early in elementary school because the classes are composed of students from all of our campuses. And they've talked about how when those kids land at White Hill years down the road, they'll see some former friends, which is pretty neat. We really wanted to make this a smooth transition for these students. And so we are giving them the opportunity to connect with their former teacher and classmates twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The in-person kiddos come into school, get settled, and then their former classmates that are now in Virtual Learning Academy join them via Zoom. So we're keeping that connection going there. And we've also connected all of the former teachers up with the virtual learning teachers just to make sure that they have any information they might need to know about how they can best support those kids. And then just as our in-person students are having in-person live art, music, and physical education for the remainder of the year, our Virtual Learning Academy students are also having synchronous live virtual art, music, and physical education. So we're excited to be able to offer that program. At the middle school level, our teachers are continuing to room and Zoom, and they've gotten really, really good at it and are enjoying doing that and are enjoying having larger classrooms of kids in front of them. And Marcy, I think, are there any questions about the Virtual Learning Academy before we move forward?
All right, thank you. So with the change to, as we've talked about, not having rooming and Zooming, we did need to relook at our attendance because under our hybrid model, for students who were needing to quarantine or who were absent from in-person school, they were able to just revert back to Zoom for those days that they weren't in school. But now that we're not doing rooming and Zooming, we needed to revisit what our plan would be for students. Now, unfortunately, Julie and I didn't catch that we didn't update this slide. So I'm going to talk about the updates that were made since we actually, this was our original conversation. And then we had a conversation before spring break with all of the site administrators and made some changes. So for Virtual Learning Academy students, they will continue to use distance learning program, attendance codes, and engagement practices, just like all of our kids or our teachers did at the very beginning of the school year. So for any student who's in Virtual Learning Academy, if they do need to quarantine for some reason or they're absent from school, but they're not too sick, for example, to attend school, then they'll just continue to Zoom in to their VLA class. And if for students who are in person, we've gone back to utilizing pre-pandemic attendance code. Basically, you're absent or you're tardy. And so those are kind of the basic two codes. And for family or for students who are absent from school, if the absence is for 1 to 4 days, then the parent or guardian or student can connect with their classroom teacher for any missed work. And then if the absence is more than 4 days, this is where the change comes in. So these next two bullets, the actual, it's 5 to 15. It's for any absence 5 or more days, the parent or guardian may request an independent study, and that's in accordance with our independent study policy. And so if they need an independent study, then they would just contact the school just as they always have, and then the school staff would explain the process. And so what we have done is that third bullet is what's not there. So any student absent for more than 15 days does not have to go to Virtual Learning Academy. Of course, there may be situations where families decide that they need for their child to go into VLA or for their child from VLA to come into in-person, but that's going to be determined on a case-by-case basis. That won't just be as we've been able to do all year up until our phase 4, which is a very fluid model for students to be able to move between the hybrid or the virtual learning model. We did need families to make their decision and a commitment through the end of the school year. So it would just only be on a case-by-case, and that would be worked out at the school site level. So with that, let's see, is there any questions about attendance? Shelley?
I just had one question, just clarification. When you say 1 to 4, that's consecutive days, not cumulative or 1 to 4 within a month. It's consecutive, correct? Okay.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So so anywhere, okay. But if, yeah, and so that's what we ended up going to, was just being able to revert it. Actually, there were a few situations that came up as we talked the week prior to the spring break, where there were some situations for families that decision that we had made earlier wasn't going to work for at all. And it just wasn't best for the student. And that's one of the drivers that we always look at in Ross Valley, is what's best for students. And so we as an administrative team made a change to what our decision was.
Got it. So independent study is not Virtual Learning Academy. It's a whole separate category.
Correct. Yeah. So the student and the family would basically sign a contract that they would then complete a certain body of work in accordance with the independent study rules, which is there has to be a minimum, I don't know if I remember off the top of my head, it's 240 minutes a day that a student would need to complete in order to be able to get credit for that school day. And that's a legal requirement. Yeah. And the requirement by law too is that an independent study cannot be for anything less than 5 days of absence. It can only be for 5 and more. And that's ed code. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Sure. Marcy, it's Rachel. I had a quick question.
Yeah.
So for the middle schoolers, they're still rooming and Zooming. Does this independent learning study apply to them as well, or can they opt into Zoom for a day if they're not feeling well? Okay.
The middle schoolers can, yeah, because sorry. And when we're talking about that, yeah. So at elementary, we're not rooming and Zooming, but as Julia mentioned during her portion is yes, at middle school, we still are. But we've been able to actually implement, because re-implement our independent study option for any families at Whitehill, if that makes sense for them too. Because sometimes if you're traveling, you may not have access to internet. And so you don't have the opportunity. And which independent study in our district has basically always been used for traveling. And so for families that don't have access, we needed to be sure that those students were continuing their learning and did not suffer any learning loss.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
And one of the things too that we really looked at was our families were given, 3 to 4 weeks of a heads up that we would be moving into phase 4. But we know that a lot of times with any of our school breaks, families do make plans, whether it's around a holiday or it's around a break of some kind, is they do make plans to go see families, their family or friends, or just travel, get away if families have time off work. And so we knew that we needed to put something in place that would not jeopardize our students' abilities to continue their education. And we did not want families to suffer any financial loss if they were not able to cancel plans or that kind of thing. So we wanted to also make sure that we were doing no harm to any of our students or families. And throughout all of our planning, we are been able to check off pretty much everything off of our list. We still have a number of classified openings, and these positions basically are what supports the supervision of our students out on recess. We continue to recruit and fill the positions, and as these are necessary for our long-term planning to ensure a full return. In the meantime, though, we are very thrilled that our parents are so awesome, because every school site has had a number of parents volunteer to be on campus during the recesses to ensure that there's enough supervision for the students, and so that our teachers and our staff can get their breaks and make sure the students are properly supervised. So we're very thrilled and blessed to have such a wonderfully supportive parent community to ensure that all of our students, staff, and schools are supported. And so this last area, I guess we could have figured out how to kind of do a half check, but it kind of is almost a full check. We have filled a lot of our classified positions, but with the support of our parent volunteers, we have been able to ensure that we can cover all of the recesses and give all of our employees their required breaks. So very thrilled to be part of Ross Valley and to see us continuing to work in partnership and to benefit all of our students and schools. And last but not least, Teresa loves this slide because, of course, it brings her back to her Hidden Valley days, but we just love the colors. So blue and orange it is. For the 21-22 school year, we are indeed looking at a full return. And on 4/6, just our Tuesday of spring break, Governor Newsom released the blueprint, beyond the blueprint for a safer economy. And so that is what the state is looking at, to fully reopen the state, and it could happen on June 15th as long as 2 criteria are met, and that is if the vaccine supply in California is sufficient for 16 years on up folks who wish to be inoculated, and that hospitalizations are stable and low, and specifically that hospitalizations among fully vaccinated individuals are low. So those are the 2 triggers that will put us into the beyond the blueprint. And at that point, there would be no more tiers. And Governor Newsom has made it clear that he intends to keep the state's mask mandate. And that's what Dr. Willis has said, is that it looks like if there's anything we know going into the 21-22 school year, is that we will all still be wearing masks. So we anticipate that being with us for a little while longer. But with the good news of the move from 4 feet to 3 feet of distancing between students, that wasn't really necessary for our elementary schools because we could fit in all of our classes at 4 feet. But at middle school, it was really necessary and helpful to bring back all of our students 5 days a week. So we were really thrilled that that occurred in time for Whitehill. And as you may know, those of you who have middle schoolers, or just may have seen the emails come through, that Whitehill actually started their 7th and 8th grade back in full right before spring break. So they were able to start that the week before for their 7th and 8th graders. And that was, really a tribute also to their teachers in wanting to have as few transitions as necessary, but knowing that we would be able to go full time after. They said, hey, why not? Let's just start the week before. And so very thrilled that in sometimes, as we hope and as our best laid plans, sometimes we can do things sooner than otherwise what is anticipated. So one of the things that we do know related to our compliance requirements is related to Cal OSHA. And what I've learned in attending some workshops and some trainings is that sometimes Cal OSHA moves at a slower pace than what the CDPH, California Department of Public Health, may change in their guidelines. So as of right now, we'll still continue to be monitoring that. So until there's any further changes with Cal OSHA, those emergency temporary standards, we know that we'll still have to be having those in place. But with Cal OSHA, that's an employment related. So we'll be monitoring those. But we have no reason to at all anticipate at this point anyway, that we won't be able to return. We will, and we'll be returning to a full school year. That's our phase 5. And that's what we're looking forward to beginning in the 21-22 school year. And also, if I might add, we also know that there are some monies that have been given state and federally to the schools. And so we're in the process of unpacking what the requirements are around how those monies can be spent. Some have different timelines. Some need to be spent by the end of 2022 school year, so others by the end of 2024. So what we know in Ross Valley is we want to be very strategic as to how we designate these monies. And because what we also know is that for any program or anything that we spend the money on that would require recurring spending after those monies have been spent, we'd have to figure out how to continue being able to provide the funding for them. And so we're looking at that. Some of the pots of money have some specific requirements to get stakeholder feedback. So we're planning that. We have Superintendent's Council coming up at the end of the month. So some of the agenda items that are standing on Superintendent's Council are schools reopening and LCAP. And then now we'll be adding the new topic of our one-time money. And we're calling it the one-time pots. And so we're looking forward to, we're very thankful that we have that additional money, because we know that as we're looking forward into going into next school year, we do anticipate being able to support our students academically, socially, emotionally, as well as our staff, and ensuring that everybody in our schools has what's needed to ensure the greatest success. Alrighty, so that brings us to questions or thoughts. Trustees?
This is Ryan. It's just a tremendous amount of work. And it's also from looking back to where we were having these meetings a year ago and the uncertainty that we all dealt with and the sheer weight of that uncertainty. It's really it's fantastic to actually see a lot of daylight and a lot of the work that a lot of people did, a lot of lifting, and it's easier for us to have clarity. We can kind of see things, we can kind of put it back, and it comes with a lot of gratitude and a lot of really hard work by you, Marcy. And also I wanted to put out there for all those teachers and people that got vaccinated through the district, it was Marcy Trahan that was out there pushing that thing, and her staff and her people, and really, really pushed this through to get to where we are. So you deserve some major credit for how fast and how we're doing. And I want to make sure everybody heard it.
Well, thank you. It definitely is a team effort. There is nothing that I could ever do alone. And so thankful for Julia, Eric, Esther, Chris here at our district office, as well as all of our staff, all of our principals. This is all a super major group effort. We've usually historically have one meeting a week as an administrative team. And this year we've had 2, and they're not short meetings. They last upwards of 2.5 to 3 hours. And every single one of our meetings has been about planning and re-looking at what we're doing and how are we doing with that, and making changes to our plans and further planning. So this has been a huge, tremendous lift. And of course, with our classified and certificated employees, none of this would be possible for our employees to come back in person, and very few needed to remain out and virtual. And all of our teachers who were needing to be virtual have returned in person, except for one, as Julia mentioned. We have one that is, and she could have returned, but we needed a virtual learning teacher. And so she said, yes, absolutely, I'll continue in that mode to support our kids. And so this has been an amazing Herculean effort with our families and our parents for their patience and for their input, giving us input throughout the way and being there to support our schools and our students, the flexibility and just the trust that our kids have in knowing that all of the adults in their lives are there to look out for and take care of them.
It's
And it is
remarkable.
absolutely,
It is remarkable
It
work.
is.
It is.
It is.
Yeah. This is an amazing district, and I'm so happy to continue to be part of it. Just really is. It's a fabulous place to be.
I would just echo that. And the other thing to put on top of that too is all of the communication. So it wasn't just meeting and planning, but then it was turning around and also doing all of the communicating. And so, you know, we're as trustees on all of the email distribution lists from all the principals and being able to see their communication out to their parents and teachers and kids. So that's another whole aspect of all of this is communicating, and the district has been doing a lot of work. So really appreciate all the planning, all the work, all the adjusting, the resilience, everything you've said, and communication.
Thank you.
I do have to agree with Shelley and with Ryan. The communication has been fabulous to like the families. I have kids in two different schools, one at the middle school and one at the elementary. And so I've gotten a flavor for both of those. But it's been great just to see, I know where my kids are going. I know where they're dropped off. I know that they're in different areas that they need to go to. I know when there's pickups where I need to go. I mean, it's fantastic. And there's also been a lot of encouragement of kids walking and riding or getting to school alternate ways. And with the traffic now, I think it's really helpful. But it's just been great to see like the number of kids who are getting to school alternate ways now, and that's being encouraged. So thank you guys. I know it's been a tremendous amount of work, and it's showing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Then we can move on to the